two social misfits would begin a whirlwind relationship. Ashley, Taylor, and Kevin Sweat are both shy and a little quirky, which is why they fit so well together. Having been the best of friends in high school, they would meet up many years later and get engaged, and plan to travel to Louisiana for their wedding, telling family they would be gone for 2 weeks. When 2 weeks would come and go, and Ashley's family couldn't contact her, they began to worry. Little did they know that what would happen next would uncover a serial killer that had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Before revealing the details of this case, we would like to send our thoughts and condolences to the family and loved ones of Ashley Taylor. Waukesha, Oklahoma. Ashley Taylor would grow up in a difficult family dynamic, with her younger brother Shane and sister Alana both having special needs. Her brother was also wheelchair bound, and she would often help her mom by helping him get out of bed or by doing other jobs around the house to help. While family life had its challenges, Ashley was still a happy young girl who was always smiling. In school, she was a little socially awkward, but that didn't stop her from making friends with Anna Film.
In school, she kind of brought like a spark of life. She was always laughing. She was really shy, but she was, kind of boy crazy.
Being a small local school of less than 100 students, Ashley would find herself with a crush on many of the boys there. However, one of them stood out in particular, a boy by the name of Kevin Sweat. Kevin was also a bit socially awkward and shy, which is why himself and Ashley seemed to make a connection. An avid poet and artist, Kevin was into many things that many of the boys his year level weren't, and this would lead to him being bullied in school. Ashley was also a target of bullying in school about her weight and because of her situation at home, which likely strengthened the bond between herself and Kevin. The two would start a friendship and enjoyed having someone they could talk to. Kevin would come over to Ashley's house and the two would play board games and video games together.
They would hang out over there and watch scary movies together, and they appeared like they were best friends. But you could tell that Ashley had a crush on him for sure. She would giggle around him,
The two social outcasts were not in any honor rolls or part of any sporting team at school. They didn't really fit in anywhere.
And that's the glue that held Ashley and Kevin together. The sense that they were outcasts, and I think they found comfort in each other over that.
While being the best of friends and hanging around each other a lot, no romantic relationship ever evolves, likely because they're both too shy to suggest it. In 2004, Kevin would graduate, and Ashley would decide to finish high school from home so she could help take care of her brother and sister while her mom was at work. Ashley and Kevin begin to drift apart, with their lives heading in different directions. Ashley would eventually finish her diploma online, and she would graduate. Kevin, in the meantime, would study at the local technology center, where he would be voted as Student of the Year. Kevin looks like he's on his way to a bright future. That is, until tragedy would change his life forever. In a hotel room on the outskirts of town, Kevin's older brother Brian would be found dead of a drug overdose. The young man, who appeared to have finally discovered himself and was making a future career, would now become withdrawn, struggling to come to terms with his brother's death. Across town, Ashley and her friend Anna were catching up, reminiscing about their high school years and some of the boys they had crushes on, and began talking about Kevin, when suddenly the phone would ring. As fate would have it, after 3 long years of having no contact with him, on the other end of the phone would be Kevin Sweat. While they hadn't spoken in a long time, Ashley never stopped thinking about him and the connection they had together.
Apparently, he had had a crush on her all those years too. I just remember how, excited she was.
The two would decide to meet up after a long time apart, and from that moment on, the two were inseparable. After only a short time, Kevin would move into Ashley's house, with Ashley's mom, brother, and sister. He would even help out by taking Ashley's brother Shane to doctor's appointments, as her mom didn't have a car. Kevin would work double shifts at a local fast food store, and with the extra money, was able to afford an apartment for himself and Ashley. After dating for 2 years, the couple would move into their own apartment and begin their life together.
I'd go over there and Ashley would talk about their days and she'd say, "Oh my God, Kevin did this," or, "He said this the other day," and they flowed well together.
Only a few months after moving in, however, family and friends began to notice a change in Ashley.
I didn't know what it was, but, things weren't as light as they had been. And I would start to hear from her more about them fighting and just little arguments, tension.
She had stopped hanging around with her friends, and anytime they tried to organize something, she would claim she was unwell or had other excuses not to attend. Friends began to think that something was seriously wrong, almost like she was being told to stay home by Kevin. She had almost stopped communicating with the outside world and would spend her days isolated in her small apartments.
At that point, I was worried about her. I was living in Tulsa, and I would try to convince her to come with me for the day, a day trip in Tulsa, and she wouldn't do it. She felt like she had to stay there. When a relationship is having issues, it's hard to know how serious that is. And the more I tried to get her to tell me about their arguments, she just kind of clammed up harder. It just felt like there was something behind that door that I wasn't supposed to see for whatever reason.
Ashley's family begins to think that Kevin's grief over losing his brother might be causing tensions in the relationship. 3 years on after the passing of his brother, he still appeared to be severely traumatized by the ordeal and wasn't able to overcome it. He started blogging online, writing that he believed law enforcement hadn't looked into the situation properly, or it could have been a drug deal gone bad, or that he may have been injected against his will. There was strong resentment in his writings that justice was never served for his brother. He would post numerous poems and artwork, hinting at the unending sadness that he felt over his brother. Ashley, meanwhile, would try her best to help him heal, hoping things would improve.
I wanted to help her, but it was hard to help her when she wouldn't let me. And so I just decided I wasn't going to go back. The next time I heard anything, it was just a random post on Facebook. She was talking about they were planning on getting married.
Ashley's family were over the moon for her, and it had seemed that a fresh wind had blown over the relationship. Kevin would take Ashley back to the lake where they had their first memories of being together and propose to her.
I was excited for them that they were able to work out whatever they were dealing with.
Ashley would come home and show her mother Trish the ring, telling her they were getting married. They had planned to go to Louisiana to have a private ceremony and spend a further 2 weeks there for their honeymoon. Ashley was excited as she had never been out of state before. Kevin had said that he had borrowed money from his father to pay for the wedding and honeymoon and to buy a new place for them when they got back.
And I gave her my blessings. She came home and said, "Mom, I'm engaged." She was so happy with the ring. It was July 15th. She came to my house after getting her hair cut. She got her some new pants. She asked me if I liked them, and of course I liked them. And then she said, "Well, we're going to go get married." She goes, "And I'll call you when we get there." And I kissed her on the cheek and I said, "Well, wait for your call."
Ashley would never make that call. At first thought, her family thought that she may have been having such a good time that she had forgotten to call. But then her brother Shane's birthday would come around 9 days after Ashley and Kevin had left for Louisiana, an event she would never forget.
She would never forget his birthday, Shane's birthday, no matter what.
2 weeks would pass by, and Ashley's family began to call each other asking if they had heard from her. After nobody was able to make contact with her, they decided to call her friends and ask if they had seen her, and none of them had heard anything.
They was supposed to come back the 29th, they said. And Lana kept looking out that front window for her sister. She stood there most of the day waiting for her to pull up, and they never came.
Ashley's family would go to her apartment to see if she was there, and when they knocked, they would get no reply. They would speak with a neighbor from across the street to ask if she had seen Ashley. She hadn't, but it said their car had been parked back at the house the past 2 nights. Becoming even more concerned, they would drive to Henrietta, to the location where Kevin worked at a fast food restaurant. While he wasn't at the restaurant, the manager would confirm that Kevin had not missed a single shift for the past several weeks.
From the 15th on, he went to work every single day. And that's when we know they didn't even go to Louisiana to get married but we just didn't know where Ashley was at.
With this news in hand, they would contact police immediately. Police officer Lyndon Spears would be dispatched to the Taylor home.
I was dispatched to a missing persons call. I made contact with Ashley's family. Once I started speaking to them, I was really concerned. What concerned me the most was that her fiance had been seen in Henrietta, which was south of Okmulgee, about 14 miles a couple of days earlier. So that kind of concerned me that Ashley was still not, coming home and seeing that he had been seen.
Moments after lodging a missing persons report, a neighbor would call Ashley's mother, Trish, to let her know Kevin had just pulled into the parking lot at the apartment complex. The family would race over to confront Kevin, which, as they arrived, was trying to drive out of the parking lot. He was in the car, alone, with no sign of Ashley. As the family would surround the car demanding answers, Kevin would claim that they had broken up 2 weeks ago. He said the last time he had seen her, he dropped her off by a bridge.
It was shocking. Right then, I knew something bad had happened. I just didn't know what.
All the commotion at the apartment complex had caused some neighbors to call 911, and Officer Lyndon Spears would arrive on scene.
When I arrived, the family was kind of around the car. There was a lot of people. So I told Kevin, go to the police department. I really want to talk to you about what's going on. He got into his vehicle and I followed. And that's when the interview with Kevin started to kind of unfold. Kevin is very intelligent, soft-spoken, very polite, different. I've dealt with multiple homicides, drug dealers, gang members, things of that nature. But Kevin is the only person that I was ever in a room with that there was just something unnerving about him, about his aura.
Kevin would go on to tell detectives that Ashley was claiming that he didn't love her and didn't want to marry her. He claimed he looked back in his rearview mirror and the last thing he saw was her walking off.
He told me that he never called her, he never went back to check on her, he never seen her again. I asked him if he was to take us back to where he dropped her off, would we find her? And his response was no. There's no way you're going to find her.
This isn't your typical reaction from someone who is concerned for the welfare of their partner. A typical response would be something like, I hope so, can I help you go look for her? The fact he so bluntly implied you're never going to find her was a huge red flag for detectives.
So I asked Kevin, have you ever had any interactions with law enforcement before this? Kevin says, well, there was this time where I had gotten in trouble for marijuana. Okay, not a big deal. Oh, but there was also this one time where OSBI talked to me. Okay, time out. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations is now speaking to you about something. That's a big thing. So I asked him, really, what'd they talk to you about? Well, supposedly the gun that I had owned was a match to one that was used to kill some.
The case that Kevin was referring to was one of the most shocking cases in the history of the small community. In 2008, Skylar Whitaker and Taylor Placker, aged 11 and 13, were shot to death and left in a ditch by the side of the road just a few miles from Kevin and Ashley's home. The double murder of 2 innocent girls had rocked the small community, with many fearing for their safety. Kids weren't allowed out to play, doors were locked, and many people had purchased guns to keep themselves safe. At the scene, 5 shell casings were located, which when analyzed, would come back to a .40 caliber Glock handgun. When police would make this knowledge public, Many tips came into the hotline about people who own .40 caliber handguns. Amongst all of those was one report about Kevin Sweat, who had purchased a .40 caliber Glock handgun a year prior. When questioned about the gun, he claimed he had sold it and no longer had it in his possession. Without the gun, authorities were not able to do much further. With no witnesses and no further evidence, detectives had very little to go on, and the case would eventually go cold. Many years later, here is Kevin once again in front of detectives, with the suspicion he may have carried out a murder. It would also make them wonder, is he also the monster who carried out the Walika murder of 2 young girls? What was Kevin doing around the time of those murders?
Within that timeline, that's when I couldn't get her to leave her apartment. That's when they were always fighting and it seemed like her fear was growing more and more, and it wasn't just about having arguments. There was something serious happening.
Ashley had also been spotted at church a week before she was supposed to leave for her honeymoon and appeared to be very upset. Is it possible that Kevin had divulged a dark secret to her? Police would now move to gain as much evidence as possible against Kevin Sweat.
We got a search warrant typed up for Ashley in his apartment, and his car was parked out front. And I remember we were walking outside, and my lieutenant, he's like, "What do you think?" And my initial response was, "This guy's probably a damn axe murderer." And we both laughed about it. Lieutenant Sanders goes to the driver's side and he unlocks the door. And I said, "Hey, go ahead and pop the trunk." So he pops the trunk. Trunk comes up and I step back and I look at my lieutenant. I'm like, there's an axe in the trunk. I get this axe out of the trunk. And there's some type of substance on the axe. I'm not sure what it is, but it was odd enough I wanted to collect this axe as evidence. Then I go to the front of the vehicle and I search the glove box and I find a woman's wallet. Ashley's ID, her credit cards. This is bad.
With no body, the evidence they have is purely circumstantial. A warrant would be obtained to search his computer, which would find that he was obsessed with guns. They also found further evidence of his online blogging, where he would talk about Ashley and their relationship, and how unhappy he was. His blogs would also contain a common theme, where he seemed to be counting down to a big event. That timeline would coincide with the week that Ashley would go missing. Detectives would ask Kevin to go on a ride along with them, to show them the route that he traveled with Ashley the day she went missing. He agreed, and would reinforce his statement that they were having an argument, and he let Ashley out and never saw her again. From there, he would travel to Nichols Park Lake, where he would sit for a few hours and ponder before returning to his father's house. When they asked where his dad's house was located, Kevin would reply in Walika, and the investigators' hearts would sink. They would take him back to the police station to question him further about the events of the day to see if his story was consistent. Agent Tidsworth would conduct the interview with Kevin Sweat.
We interviewed him again. During that interview, he changed his story. He says, we were together, we drove to Nichols Park Lake. We got into an argument about the wedding, and he picks up a knife, throws it at her. She gets the knife, starts cutting herself. Then she walks out on the pier, and then she falls into the lake. And that's the last time that he sees her.
When pressed about the details in the story, Kevin would again change his version of events.
The next story goes, she had the knife, she cuts the side of her neck, and she falls down on the dock. He picks up the knife and cuts the other side of her neck, killing her, and pushes her off into the lake. And that's the last time he sees her. At that point in time, we arrest Kevin Sweat for the murder of Ashley Taylor.
The next step would be to try and retrieve Ashley's body from the lake. Several law enforcement agencies would travel out and use sophisticated sonar equipment to scan the lake. but would come up empty. It appeared like Kevin had made the whole story up, but police had to continue on the hunt for her body. Investigators were running out of leads. That is, until a phone call out of the blue would change the whole investigation. Authorities were talking to Kevin's father, who had said he had found evidence that a fire was started on his property. When he checked the burn pile, he had found something interesting buried amongst the ash.
He found a women's diamond gold ring.
They found a ring, and they brought it to me. It had smoke on it. I said, yeah, that's her ring.
An extensive search was carried out on the property end of the burn pit. Human bones were found on the burn pit, believed to be the remains of Ashley Taylor.
Kurt Tesworth came to the house, and he wouldn't tell me what happened to her. I knew it wasn't good. It was just horrible. And then I tried to tell my kids that they'll never see their sister again. That was really hard.
While they now have the evidence to convict Kevin for the murder of his fiancée Ashley, the question of the Walika murder still remains. But they need evidence to tie him to the crime. Investigators would now scan his dad's property with metal detectors, trying to locate any shell casings or even the gun used in the killing of the two girls which may have been buried. In an area that Kevin would go and shoot his guns, they would locate 9 spent casings from a .40 caliber Glock.
The casings were brought back to our laboratory, and the firearms examiner was able to say that 8 of those casings out of the 9 were fired from the same gun that killed the 2 girls in Walika.
Police now had all the evidence they needed to charge Kevin Sweat with 3 murders. The evidence would be instrumental in getting a conviction, but what prosecutors still couldn't understand was why did he kill these 2 young girls? What was the motive? Only a week out from trial, investigators were talking with some of Kevin's co-workers at the fast food restaurant. One of them would mention that Kevin had previously said that he hated the Placker family. When the employee asked why, Kevin would claim they killed my brother. Kevin's brother had died of a drug overdose, and he believed that one of the young girl's brothers had sold him the drugs that ultimately took his life. In an act of revenge, Kevin would kill the 2 young girls as payback for his brother dying.
Did the girls say something? Did the girls throw something? Or what happened? What happened that day that set you off?
There would be no point of shooting kids. I don't know what you're talking about.
Listen, there's no question. We know that you were there that day. We know that you were there that day when that happened with those 2 girls, okay? Because we have forensic evidence, Kevin, from the scene. We have your DNA. It's not an issue here whether you were there. We know that you were there. We know that you were responsible. Okay, we need to get over that. I need to know what happened that day. What happened? Just tell me what happened that day.
Look, first off, I don't know.
Listen, well, you do know, Kevin, because you were there. Did those girls do something to you? Did they say something to you? Did something set you off that day or what? There's no doubt about it, Kevin. There's no doubt about it that you were there and that you were responsible for it. That's not the issue there.
I've never met them. I've never even seen them before until I saw them on the news.
No, until you, that day, Kevin, okay, we know that you were there and that you were responsible for that. I don't want to hear no lies. I didn't come here to hear lies. I came here to hear the truth. And we know that you were there. We know that you were responsible.
I'm guessing it was mental issues. I thought I was seeing shit.
Okay. Seeing what?
I don't know, things. Monsters.
Okay. And what'd you do?
Panicked.
Okay.
And shot.
Okay, so you saw 2 demons.
My feelings on why Kevin did what he did to Ashley, she knew what he had done to those little girls. And he was afraid that she was going to tell somebody what he had done.
He wanted out of the relationship, but he knew the only way that he was going to be able to do that without her saying anything to anybody was to get rid of her.
With the overwhelming evidence against him, Kevin pleads guilty to all 3 murders in an attempt to save his life from the death penalty. On the day of his sentencing, as he was being led into the courtroom, he would suddenly jump at his attorney, and with a hidden razor blade, he would cut his throat almost from ear to ear. While the cut wasn't extremely deep or life-threatening, it still required his attorney to undergo medical treatment. The judge would wait for the attorney to get bandaged up before declaring there would be no more delays in sending this man to prison for the rest of his life. Kevin Sweat would receive 3 consecutive life sentences for the murders of Ashley Taylor, Skylar Whitaker, and Taylor Placker.
Ashley was kind of the glue for a lot of the people around her.
I miss her so much.
Ashley, we love you, we miss you.
She was that bright spot, so he took the light out. He not only took her future away, but he took, her siblings' futures away and her mom's future away.
I thought she was going to get married, and she was on her way, and she was all excited. It's still really hard. People say time heals your... Not all the time.
Kevin was so consumed by rage that he would carry out a truly heinous crime on 2 innocent children. And when the woman he supposedly loved and adored learned about this, he would take her life too, with no regard for the people it would affect. If you've been fascinated by this case, consider subscribing so you don't miss our next captivating deep dive in true crime. Channel memberships are also available by hitting the join button. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.